to kick off the panel discussion, and what I was going to ask each of my extraordinary colleagues here, and let me just quickly introduce them from the end. Everyone knows Gregory Durgin, who is the person who, working with the community, has really led this whole charge. I want to introduce you to Paul Muller. Paul's at Micro, which is a pioneer, as many of you know, in RFID, and my dear old friend Matt Reynolds, who I've seen in a few years, who is a professor at the University of Washington, and also and before that at Duke, MIT PhD, MIT Masters, MIT Bachelor's, and founder of a company called ThingMagic. So I want to ask you, first of all, each of you, to talk a little bit, and maybe I'll start with you, Greg, and then we'll work backwards. What are 3 really exciting things you're seeing in RFID and beyond, right? IoT, RF, writ large. And 1 or 2 things that have disappointed you. I just want to say the way we want to run this panel is we want to make it interactive. So it's not like we'll speak for some time and then you can ask questions. Feel free to speak up. Okay? Put your hands up. Make some sound. I'll look for you. And please contribute. So it's like a 100-person panel. We're simply the people on the stage. So with that, Greg.
Okay. So some of the things that have excited me the most, being an electromagnetics professor and having to teach students, I'm always interested in physical limits, right? And we've kind of achieved certain physical limits in RFID with energy harvesting, computational power consumption, and all. But in many ways, if you look at the absolute physical limits, it's sort of where the technology is. We're orders of magnitude away from all of the fundamental limits in terms of how efficient can an energy harvester be? What's the minimum amount of power you need to expend at a node, at an IC of some sort, to exchange information across a kilometer of space? What is the minimum amount of energy that you need to do just basic computation and sensing? The orders of magnitude away from this. So I remember I gave a talk down at UT Austin in their wireless group. One of the profs came up to me, and there's a big cellular group. They do tons of cellular work down there. He said, "Wow, this is so refreshing to work in an industry where you have orders of magnitude to go with the technology instead of trying to shave off the dB here or there on a link." So those are the things that kind of excite me the most about RFID. Maybe the other thing, just as an educator, we have a lot of students in the room, and one of the really neat things about this conference and the field in general is that I'm an electrical engineering professor. You have to take all these courses at your sophomore and junior levels, circuits, electromagnetics, computer architecture, all these things. And this is like the one conference that I can bring a student to, and they see all of that at play. It truly is multidisciplinary.
No, I think that's actually a wonderful point. In fact, I think RFID is a great way to teach all the underlying topics, right? I think you and I spoke about that like 15 years ago, electromagnetics, RF, manufacturing, supply chain, sort of a cohesive field. What's something that you expected would have happened, 10 years ago that hasn't happened, that you're a little disappointed by?
In the last 5 or 10 years, I say Gen 3. That's my only answer.
We'll come back to Gen 3. I'm actually curious about it. So I do have a question on it. Paul.
Yeah, I think what really speaks to me is what you mentioned before, is about a new era in RFID, new era for RFID probably. I think my personal feeling is that there's been quite a bit of disconnect between the business side of RFID and the academic or R&D side of RFID. RFID, as you highlighted somewhere, there's a huge potential in what you can do with that. And unfortunately, or for various reasons, the business side has really only embraced the ID side of RFID. And what we really see now, also on the business side, and obviously speaking from a more corporate angle here, is that people take a step back and start to look at what can we really do else other than just providing PC code. And I think that's really exciting from an engineering perspective. So, and we have people on the team working on new things, on what we call augmented RFID, combining RFID technology with sensors and with user interfaces and things like that. The trend obviously is, as you highlighted, I think that was a very nice phrase, let RFID attack the places where we don't have energy. And that's really a trend which we see also on the business side, is things going purely passive. We have been a pioneer in doing battery-assisted passive RFID, but we really see the trend going into purely passive sensor interfaces and stuff like that. And I think there is a very interesting potential. It won't be the tens of billions of ICs and tags we're going to do in that space, at least not short term. So it's not about competing with the retail environment. It's about using the technology to do more than just the retail pack. There was the Reynolds meeting in Sunnyvale a month ago. There was an interesting keynote by some Google people. And one very important point this guy made was that actually IoT has to disappear to be successful. And to disappear not in the negative sense, but to disappear in the sense of becoming transparent. Okay? It's all about providing technology to the end user that the end user doesn't see. If we need to educate people out there on how to use RFID, that would be a big hurdle. We need to think about providing technology that blends it, that is transparent.
So that's what Steve Jobs called the magic, right? Anything designed really well, and if it really works well, it just works like magic. And you shouldn't have to deal with it. It's just happening.
Exactly.
So, Matt, what are your thoughts on, Paul talked about power and energy and so on. Tell us about, I have a sense of what you're going to say, but what are your 3 or 4 exciting things?
I think it's really interesting that RFID doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists in kind of a fluid, moving environment of other technologies. And I think your example of the smartphone, looking way back, looking at the technologies that go into a smartphone that are now mainstream, can and should apply also to RFID. So if I think back 20 years to the late 90s when I first started working on this, CMOS technology at that time was half micron and 5 volts. And you're looking at transistor counts on a tag of maybe 10,000, something like that.
Remember the term deep submicron?
Deep submicron was a thing at that time, and now you've gone from 500 nanometers to 18, 14 in the cutting edge technologies, and in the mainstream 65 is now totally commoditized. And what's interesting about that is that gives you a tremendous opportunity in terms of transistor count to add new digital functions that we did not imagine back in the day when every transistor counted. It also gives you new opportunities from an RF and electromagnetics perspective, because those half-micron transistors could switch, let's say, at a couple hundred megahertz. You get to 65 nanometer and smaller, and you have transistors that can switch at potentially 100 gigahertz. So personally, I've become very interested in millimeter wave technology, both from a communication perspective and from an imaging perspective. I'm interested in tying imaging and tagging together. So when you're working in the millimeter wave bands, you could make an image of the environment. This is going mainstream in self-driving cars as another sensor. In addition to LiDAR, you'll have a millimeter wave radar that gives you a 3D point cloud of the environment. But what's interesting about that is we can overlay tags in that environment. So not only can you see the world with RF, but for objects that have a tag on them, you can communicate identity, state, and location. And and weave that into a coherent picture of the world. So if you're a self-driving car, you're going down the road, you see things with RF, which is wonderful because you can see in the dark, you can see through fog, you can see through smoke and dust, right? You can see, but for objects that have a tag, you all of a sudden can uplink massive amounts of data from the tags that convey ID, state, and location, and present that in a coherent picture. So, you know, I kind of think about the movie The Predator with infrared vision, right? Imagine how that movie monster creature could do things if they had millimeter wave
Thank God that
vision. Thank God they did, because that'd be really scary.
But we did have Sigourney Weaver, so we could. Was
Yeah.
it Sigourney Weaver? Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, I'm really interested in what the fluid world of the other technologies can do if we keep advancing RFID along with the other things that are happening in the semiconductor and technology space.
I think that was not Sigourney Weaver, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. But,
I can't remember.
but, remember when we were doing, we were counting transistors down to 2,000, we didn't want to exceed 2,000 transistors when we did Gen 1, class 1, class 0, basically. How many transistors are there now in your typical impinge tag, right? And it's quite a bit, so it's basically becoming a small computer. What do you think the applications of that can be beyond RFID? And I'm going to ask everyone this, right? What do you think, Mike? Let me start with you.
Certainly in terms of sensing, you'll have the ability to do much more complicated sensing and signal processing on the tag. Particularly if you have a local source of energy, you could do data logging essentially for free. And then every object has the history of the sensor data, and that's a new capability that we...
But it can log if it doesn't have power. I mean, so it can only log in the field, right? It can log when it's out of the field. So scavenging becomes something, all things that, well, it could be passive, it need to be battery resistant, right? Scavenging becomes useful.
Yeah, so if you know, I spoke with Chris Diorio from Impinj recently. He's in Seattle, so I see him every once in a while. And you know, the other point he's making is that their tags are now so power efficient that they actually are powered all the time anyway by ambient signals in the environment. And that's a problem for Gen 2 RFID. That's a problem. You want the tags to forget their state.
Yeah, the session.
For the session.
Yeah, the session. Yeah.
But it's an opportunity, right? If you throw that out and say, oh wow, this tag is powered all the time from ambient RF, from digital television and cell phone signals and all that. Now you can do computing locally on the tag.
You know, it's sort of funny, I'll put Rahul on the spot, but a few years ago, I heard Rahul cursing in the lab during his PhD, and he used to refer to the tags as cockroaches, because he couldn't kill them. Okay? And there was some tag somewhere just responding, where the hell are these damn cockroaches? He couldn't find them. But Paul, what do you think? What, you know, as the computing capability goes up on these chips, what can you do? By the way, folks, if you have questions, comments, if you want to join the discussion, just jump right in. It's not a problem. Just hold your hand up and I'll catch it.
Anyone so far?
Anyone disagree? You can ridicule us too. We're pretty confident here. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we really see a big opportunity in terms of sensing the ambient world and trying to make things, as I said before, trying to make things transparent, do things without people even asking for them, trying to figure out what they want to do before they actually know.
Is there an example you can share?
Well, I think it's, generally speaking, it's about, I mean, short term, this is more the long-term vision. Short term, we're talking about, let's say, smart agriculture. Agriculture is a big deal in the 21st century. We need to improve our productivity. We need to get local greenhouses because we want to have green produce. But so green produce implies that you don't want to ship it half over the world. So there is a lot of investment actually going into these areas. And then how do you want to make it energy? How do you want to make greenhouses and agriculture in general energy efficient? How do you want to make it efficient in terms of chemicals, etc.? Sensing has a big place in there, and so basically you want to take the work out of the hands of the farmer and try to add big data and make things smart without human interaction. How do you do that? Well, the first thing you need is sensing. Right? You need to know what the current state is. Before you can act, you need to know what the current state is. So we're looking in, the obvious ones are temperature sensing, moisture sensing, but then you can easily add humidity sensing, light intensity, how much light intensity is there even during the day, and do you need, if you're talking about greenhouse infrastructure, do you need to turn on the power, or you can adjust dynamically without human interaction. On the other side, you can think about healthcare. Healthcare is another big topic, short term for the 21st century. Our healthcare spending goes up a lot. And it goes up a lot because obviously populations are aging, but also population is growing. So we can, by adding a little bit of technology, we can make a big difference there. We can, and in addition to trying to work on the cost side, we can improve the perception and the healthcare itself in the sense of freeing up humans from doing the tedious tasks. And in addition, add more benefits. You can think about temperature monitoring. If you're able to monitor a sick person's temperature over a day or over the time frame of 2 days, that actually can help you do the diagnostics. Different illnesses have different temperature profiles during the day. And this is not something we exploit today, even in hospital environments, because your temperature monitoring is done, 4 or 5 times a day. That doesn't give you a lot of information. If you can monitor on a 15-minute basis, there is huge potential out there, not only free up the nurses from doing the tedious work and free up their time to do the actual human interaction, which is so critical to becoming healthy again, but also getting more data and applying all these capabilities we have with the big data.
So you should get into or faster than the microsample rate of the patient. In other words, we don't have any sense of what the time constant of a human patient is, and you can therefore sample much faster.
Well, I think for monitoring temperature, even measuring it once an hour is much better than what we're doing today.
Greg, what are your thoughts on this?
So I'd like to synthesize these 2 points. Dr. Muller is talking about a world of sensors everywhere, and we're talking earlier about we can't shut the tags off. Sometimes they're doing so good now in terms of energy harvesting. There's so much RF out there already, and we can put more computation on the tags at lower power than ever before. Well, that means that you could envision networks now that don't even need a reader in the classical sense. They don't even need to transmit. Maybe they use the Durgin modulated signals that already exist, and you pull that information. This is the point where I give a plug to one of our talks next tomorrow. Professor Ivor Splits says he's done some great work on that. I think he might talk about a little bit of that. I know UW's done some work on that. I think that's a whole unexplored area. There's no product out there that does that, but we're getting to the point where we can make that.
I mean, just imagine if, these lights are going to go to LEDs very soon. These are not, but when they go to LEDs, there's probably some competition there. Just imagine putting a radio in there, right? Then you have readers everywhere, and we have tags everywhere. So in so many ways, I think that our community is in a better place to achieve, sort of the ultimate ubiquity than anyone else, which would be interesting. That's how the term was created. How many folks in the audience have worked in sensors related to RFID? What are some of the applications? Where do you use them?
Networking of all the plants in the backyard garden.
Internet of plants.
In the greenhouse. Measuring soil moisture, environmental humidity, temperature at 20 microbars in continuous operation.
Got it.
Communicating kilometers away, ultra low cost. You guys are tied. You have coupled backscatter radio and RF energy harvesting. Those two operations are conflicting and should be decoupled. When you do RF energy harvesting, you must absorb all the energy. When you do backscatter radio, you have to reflect all the energy. So, one of the basic limitations of RFID technology right now is this mindset that you have to couple those two things. You should decouple them as soon as possible. Okay? What Professor Durgin just mentioned about ambient stuff, have you ever imagined that every cellular telephony company can become an RFID reader?
Exactly. I think, Paul, I mean, you were talking, that's how EM got its start, right? Well, not EM got its start. That's one of the things EM was doing, was battery-assisted passive. And the idea was to decouple the computation, at least, from the communication. Tell us what your view of that industry is.
I think there's definitely potential for that, so thanks for bringing that up. There's room, in my opinion, there is room for passive RFID with or without sensors. There's room for battery systems.
Well, it's different from what you're saying. This is decoupling just the competition, but nonetheless, yeah.
There is room for active technologies. There's room for everyone in different places. And I mean, as much as we have a business unit working on Bluetooth Low Energy, we're working on RFID in our team. So there's different applications, and different applications have different needs. I think in the context of today, where I really see the evolution of RFID, let's call it as in non-active, so passive and battery-assisted passive. If you want to make it transparent, if you want to make it ubiquitous, then battery is not an option. Okay, battery always means that at some point in time it can be 6 months, it can be 5 years. At some point in time it will stop working. So energy harvesting is an option, but energy harvesting comes at a cost. I agree there is a cost in terms of communication if we do it passive way, but if we want to decouple it, there is a cost in terms of adding some other forms of energy harvesting.
Like photovoltaics or something, right?
Well, you can talk about solar cells and super caps, etc. There is a cost, and there is, again, similar to active tags, there is a room for these. But we don't see that, or personally, I don't see, economically speaking, the energy harvesting solution becoming the mainstream solution that is going to be distributed everywhere.
Yeah. Let's just get some more comments. Anyone else doing sense? Yes, sir. Yeah. Hold on, there's a mic coming for you.
Thank you. I maybe have a little bit of a different question. What I want to say is I completely agree with you that we're in a point in time where we can really start dreaming of applications or how the future should be. However, these visions are usually associated with a pretty boring point of cost. So where do you think do we need to go in terms of cost for RFID technology to really, change our society? And which type of technology do you think will actually go in this direction? Because if you think, when I listen to your visions, then the impression that I get is that it's typically associated with chip tags, which are pretty smart. So that's then associated with high chip costs, and so therefore a price point above 5 cents. But we're talking about a mass market where people want to pay nothing for the smart thing on their utility or whatever they're actually applying.
I'm not sure about that, actually. Let me present a controversial point of view, just to sort of stir the pot. So this is my keychain. Okay, I'm holding it up. This is the Apple, what's it called, AirPods Bluetooth thing. The Bluetooth, that's it. 2 car keys, they're both RFID actually. This is Bluetooth. And this is a tile because I keep losing my keys. And this costs like $25, right? I think what we've discovered literally in the last 5 years is if you can solve a consumer's very specific problems, they will pay for it. So in my house, I have several Echoes. Each is $50 to $100, but it's just convenient, We also have a teenager and have to get her out of her room, so it's an intercom. The Nest is $250 for a thermostat, and yet it's done fairly well. The Nest Cam is $150 plus $10 a month for doing human, to recognize that there's someone at your front door, as opposed to just a motion sensor. So I think, I'm coming back to my earlier point, I actually think that we can unshackle ourselves a little bit from the CPG mentality, that everything needed to be 3 cents. So if you can really track capital and show productivity, people will, I hope, pay for it. But I think as long as we were doing B2B, sort of the world we were stuck in, it was a very different mentality. I don't know, what do you think? Maybe I'm completely wrong, you know?
I had some experience in my industry days working on early CPG deployments at Walmart and Target and other companies. And I learned something that was maybe they teach you this in business school, but I never went to business school, which is in a business, you have the person who pays for the cost and the person who gets the benefit, right? And in the CPG case, you have the problem that, let's say the consumer packaged goods company is going to have to pay the cost of the tag, and then the retailer is going to get the benefit, right? So you've got two different profit and loss statements that don't meet, right? And that was the impediment to the adoption of that technology. But if you look at some of the consumer-facing applications where there's a closed loop around the value, that's where you can get people to pay based on value rather than worrying about cost.
Because we also have a manufacturer. Go ahead.
I completely agree with you when you're talking about high value items. However, what would of course be very, very nice is if you could replace the barcode. I mean, you were talking about something like that before,
Yeah.
where you said, okay, you have a traffic light, okay, which is read off by the car, and so traffic light communicating. And today we have the barcode on every item, and we always have to pick it up. And if you want to replace the barcode, for example, with an RFID tag, that would be extremely nice. However, if you buy your can of tomato juice, or which is 3 cents, and then your tag is more expensive than that, you know, it's going to be difficult.
So my sort of argument on that, and I'd love to get Paul and Greg's comments on this, is that, and I'm going to say it, and I'll feel bad, I don't think we should tag these things. You know why? Because vision is caught up, computer vision. In other words, you can get it with a camera now. So the Amazon Go implementation, I thought had RFID, but did not. And in fact, a friend of ours is working on non-RFID solutions. So yes, you're right, RFID, in fact, that was the foundational philosophy, is non-line of sight. But computer vision has become so spectacular that I actually don't think tagging of every consumer item, it'll happen to some, right? But tagging every consumer item, that was sort of a fight we fought for 20 years. I just wouldn't hold my breath for it. I think computer vision will do about that. Right? But I'd love to get both Greg, because, you know, from the EM perspective, Paul, because you're a vendor.
Yeah, so, you know, I always think, as an EM person, like, you love to drill down into the physics, and I'm not that good at applications. But I always see a fundamental problem with applications in this space, because my mentality is always, oh, there's a barcode, and I would like to get rid of it. Or here's a radio that I would like to cut the cord from. You never have to plug in again or change the batteries. But the problem is, a lot of these applications don't come about like that. Like the tile you're mentioning, there wasn't a corded way to do that you could contemplate, oh, well, how could I do this better? It was just came into existence when somebody put the technology to it and had that uber moment.
Tile works because your phone already has Bluetooth.
Yeah.
Tile works because
Everyone else's
7
phone.
billion
Yeah.
phones have Bluetooth.
Exactly. It's piggyback on that. It's a great idea. And so what you're saying, it's a fundamental discontinuity. It's not something that exists that you changed, right?
That's right, exactly.
Right. Paul, what do you think? I mean, I think it's a great question. Does the cost boogeyman, which cost many of us many nights of sleep, and a lot of companies to fail, right? Is that something we should fight, or is this a whole different world?
Maybe it costs me more than nights of sleep than you guys. I don't see, I think there is room for barcode replacement, and obviously that's what our industry has been doing to a large extent for the past 10 years. But I think today we're talking about something different, and we're talking about a different value proposition. And I think as you pointed out before, there is there is really, we're really looking at something where we add value to the end consumer. And when the end consumer, whether that is a buyer, or whether that is a farmer, or whether that is an hospital, when they can capture directly what the ROI is, then value proposition is very different.
And you know, sort of funny, and I want to come back, I think it's a great question. When we did RFID again 20 years ago, we were caught in the trap where the P&G put the tag on it, but Walmart got the benefit. So eventually what started happening was closed loop applications, you know, like, because then the same person puts the investment and gets a return, so it's easier to form an ROI, it's easier to please the CFO. So that's sort of what you're talking about, right? That's sort of the world we're moving towards. And in fact, we moved towards over the last 20 years.
The business case for the IoT discussion is very different from the business case when we're talking about CPG.
And that's sort of what my point was. I think that if RFID, of course we should continue to do what we do, but I think if we can be creative, we can open up a whole plethora of business cases that I think this community ought to own, but has not tapped. That's sort of my personal view on it. Let me also ask, by the way, there were other people doing sensing. Who else? Yeah, Nitin is a little biased, but go ahead, Nitin. What do you do? I know what you do.
Yeah, hello. So you asked about like what I see as the opportunities in sensing, right? So I think health monitoring is like one huge opportunity there, because you have these fitness bands, fairly common, everyone has one. But can your fitness band read what's happening in your joint? Can it predict or complain beforehand about something happening in your mouth, on your tooth, or something inside? But by making tags like very small, maybe you can put them on each and every joint. You can put them on your elbows, ankles, and everywhere. And you can monitor and see the pattern, like how is your ankle behaving every day. And if there is some anomaly, you can get that. So I think health monitoring and also like agribusiness, food storage, and even supply chain of the raw materials as well as the finished goods, because it's not organized, it's completely disorganized. Did anyone hear about production scheduling in agriculture? No, it's not common. But by tagging these items with some low-cost solutions, we can get there, like do inventory management in completely unorganized sector like agriculture. So I think health monitoring and agri are good opportunities too.
Fantastic. So another question for the panel, man. Again, please bring your questions to the floor. Greg, how many do time?
We have about 25 minutes.
25 minutes. So there is this now, you know, Bluetooth BLE is really making extraordinary inroads. And it's showing up in Bluetooth tags and beacons and sound, and now they've increased the range with the new version of Bluetooth. The power consumption's gone down. So I'm going to pose it as if it's a threat, but actually I want you to sort of look at it more sort of in a positive way. Where is BLE? And can RFID play there? Do they play together? Are they competitive? What do you think? And let's start with maybe you, Matt.
I think they're complementary technologies, and I think maybe to Agilos's point earlier, once you decouple the words RFID, backscatter, energy harvesting, some interesting opportunities arise there. So my group had a paper at this conference in 2015 showing how you can use backscatter signals to create a BLE compatible device. In other words, you can make a backscatter tag that talks BLE from the perspective of the BLE device. And what that does is that opens the world up to you, because again, you're leveraging the billions of existing smartphones as the readers.
That's a great concept. By the way, just come back to Aglos, right? Remember Mojix? And that was also a sort of decoupling in some ways, where they had these exciters, and then you had the communication. Paul?
Well, at the end, we're doing both BLE and RFID, so I would be.
So do the two groups compete with each other?
Well, better yet, is there synergy?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're, especially from the business side, actually, we're working a lot together. So when we're in a show like this, we're talking, I don't know, 30% of the time we're discussing BLE. So it is a show where people care about BLE, and I think the RFID community is partially about BLE, because BLE gives a complementary technology. So that's really our way of looking at things. Obviously, if there's a company out there which does only RFID, then they might see it as a threat, but we really see it as a complementary technology. One of the reasons for saying that is that you can do things with BLE that you cannot do with RFID and vice versa. If you're talking about a small-scale deployment where your smartphone is a good user interface, then BLE is a very powerful technique.
What if, Chris, Diorio, and others have talked about, and actually, is Hao Min here now? So Hao Min from Fudan University, I saw him a few minutes ago. His former PhD student was a postdoc in my group. Junyu Wang has a company that plugs into your phone and turns it into an RFID reader. So maybe it'll be a UHF or other frequency RFID reader will be in a phone, maybe it'll be a plug-in, right? And then you have Rocket and others. If that happened, would that compete with BLE?
There's a question down there.
Yeah. Carlos,
I
yeah.
have a correction.
Yeah.
Any embedded receiver in your smartphone, any embedded receiver in your smartphone can become a backscatter
That I
receiver.
agree. Yeah,
Not
that I
just a
agree.
Bluetooth.
Yeah.
You
That I
can
agree.
use your FM receiver, your classic 60-second receiver, to pick up backscatter radio signals. Right? And not only IoT, but sensing information.
Right. No, I think that's completely legitimate. Yeah.
So
Completely.
I don't see competition, I see complementarity, and I see a tremendous business opportunity for everybody.
No, it's a great point. In fact, and of course the problem in these phones now is the antennas. There's so many antennas competing for space. That is a real challenge from a radio perspective, certainly radio performance perspective. Great.
So, I see the existing technologies of BLE and RFID is kind of complementary, but if we, again, decouple the backscatter from the other things that are going on, you're still talking about a chasm of difference between the power consumption of a conventional, I'm going to transmit from here to here, to a reflection-based radio. So like Francesco, for example, a couple of years ago I had a paper here where he used a tunnel diode modulator. You'll have to refresh my memory about the numbers, but it's consuming 23 microwatts, just a little bit more than an RFID tag. You could get a signal across Midtown Atlanta over a kilometer reflected. And I think we ran the numbers that a AA battery could do that for 5 years if it needed to. So, I still think there's plenty of room on the link margin side for future innovation there. And it's difficult to envision how an active oscillator and amplifier setup would compete with that.
No, that's a great point. What did Feynman say? There's plenty of room beneath? At the bottom. At the bottom. There's plenty of room at the bottom. So in RF, there's plenty of room in the budget.
I just want to come back to your question. What about I assume you meant the UHF or radar effect?
Yeah.
Because there is already an RFID.
Yes.
I just want to come back to that. Personally, I see two challenges with that. One is on the user experience side. Again, we're all probably kind of geeks, and we know how to use this to do many things that maybe wasn't intended to do. But if we think about the alpha user out there, the lambda user out there, how will UHF RFID provide a good user experience when you try to interact with an object? Because unless you're adding other capabilities like directional beams or like image vision processing, it would be very difficult for an end user to understand whether he's interacting with that market or with that one. And that's, we really see that as a major hurdle. And once you throw image processing in or you throw microwave in, actually you don't need the UHF RFID anymore. You can do it with just microwave or with just the image processing. So that is one hurdle why we don't see adoption of UHF RFID readers in smartphones. There is another one which is on the technical side. People today are already struggling in many applications with coexistence between LTE band 13 and 950 megahertz and so on. And if you're struggling with base station which is about a mile away or half a mile away, how can we imagine that this would happen with the phone? That the LTE, because we need the LTE link, right? If your reader wants to read something and then link back on, you need the LTE to be up and running. You can't just switch it off. So there is some major technical challenges without going even into the availability of antenna space and so on, because you already have 4 antennas for the LTE, you might only have 2 antennas for Wi-Fi, you have an antenna for GPS and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's great.
There are some significant challenges, and on our side we don't really see the adoption of that coming anytime soon.
No, I completely agree. So now this is also a general question. Yeah. Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
On this topic, we talk about placing RFID everywhere, so on the environment, on cars, on things, and you mentioned very interestingly on low-cost items we probably won't go to that level, but we'll still keep it in a box or the pallet level, etc. And the mantra back in 2000 and beyond was, absolutely everything is tagged, and we seem to be going away from that with a more nuanced response. Tag high-end items, or tag where it makes sense. And I agree with you with regards to the automated vehicles that we should be tagging crossways. The case of the death in Tempe, Arizona a few weeks ago was because the car came across an individual who was not walking across a crosswalk. They were walking outside the bounds of that crosswalk, and that's purportedly why they were hit and killed. So if we talk continuously about the last mile, and in fact I have a book chapter with MIT Press under review, looking at RFID as the last mile, and my telecoms background informs that as a last mile because it's always made sense to me that in the end, if we want location determination and identification, we would be tagging the individual, just as your student mentioned about monitoring and fitness and health applications. We know that Stanford came out with an RFID transmitter that's implantable to do behavioural monitoring, for example, for dementia sufferers to see if they're taking their drugs on time. And my question really purports to, how close are we to overcoming the barrier of RFID on the human body or in the human body? And is that something that we don't want to openly discuss because it seems too futuristic? Or is this part of an open vision for perhaps by some who are thinking this way?
So, I have a colleague at MIT, his name is Hugh Herr, H-E-R-R. And Hugh lost his legs. He was did you know Hugh? Yeah. You overlapped with him. He lost his legs at age 19, he's my age. And then he dedicated his life to building prosthetic limbs. And after the Boston Marathon bombing, I believe the next year there was a lady who lost her legs, and she danced on Fox News wearing his prosthetics. So Hugh has this extraordinary statement. He says, we sometimes see him in a restaurant, he just walks in and sits down. You don't realize he doesn't have legs. He's a really amazing researcher, but he says something which makes you think. He says, why would you keep your real legs when you can have these? Right? And he's trying to be provocative. But I think that compared to 15 years ago, when you recall the guy who inserted a RFID tag in his hand, and I was a little taken aback. I think this is a new era, And if you read a book called Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson, he talks about, what do you gentlemen think? implantable RFID everywhere, sensors inside, you know, and we only do the pacemakers.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to call it RFID, and it's not, primary function is not going to be identification. So my grad students are back at UW right now. This week they're doing some preclinical work with research animals. They have a bidirectional neural interface that uses backscatter communication to get neural data in and out of a monkey. And you know, that's a case where it's technology that we have developed here in this community, but it's not going to be called RFID. It's a brain-computer interface, and the targeted application is for people who have Parkinson's and need a deep brain stimulator. So the technology will have that application. It is not going to be done for the sensational reasons of, you know, I can open my door lock with an implanted tag. It's going to be done because people need the technology.
Yeah, I mean, so if you unbundle the various aspects of the technology, RFID, sensing, communication, backscatter, you know, some combination thereof is going to enter, right? What about you, Paul? Are you seeing this in embeddable stuff generally?
I fully agree with Matthew's statement that we won't call it RFID, and especially it won't be an identification plan. Cochlear implants have been using near-field coupling, not NFC as in the protocol, but near-field coupling mechanism for 20+ years. So it has already been used quite widely. I think if we think about what Matthew just said, it's all about providing something useful. If there is a use for the technology, it will come. I don't think it will come I agree with Matthew that it won't come in the area of identification, because we like our privacy and all these things.
Plus we've already lost it, so.
Well, we still believe we have it, or at least the people out there still believe we have it. So it won't be for identification purpose. I don't see that coming anytime soon, but definitely in medical applications there's plenty of room for the technology.
Great.
Yeah, I agree with everything they say. I'm a little leery of these applications, but I get excited as a physicist, because trying to get this stuff to work in or around the body is always really, really hard. So a lot of good engineering problems out there and that haven't been solved.
So as a retort, you say it's not about ID, but yesterday I gave a 2-hour workshop on wandering and autistic children who seem to be drowning in huge numbers because they wander, and the house arrest style applications of 3M, ankle monitoring, or otherwise BLE solutions in the home are really not there at the moment for hundreds of thousands of people suffering with this wandering issue, of cognitive impairment or dementia. So if we are using coexistence as a framework, where we say someone escapes a house, and they're not a criminal, they're just someone who's unwell, and we are trying through various means to identify them, through facial recognition, if they pass a CCTV camera, through visual analytics, but then we have the RFID sensors around, and there are some people that require them for well-being and duty of care. Then I think it is a good idea. So I have to say to you, I don't agree with the 4 of the experts here, which I so much pay homage to. But we have to think outside, because technology is only relevant to humans, right? It's not relevant to things. RFID will actually catapult into wonderment if it's about people.
That's
right?
a great
So
point.
we know with internet working or IoT, it's about humans at the center and then things. What we buy, what we do, where we go. It's a bit like the whole analogy, So I think if we remove the need for the human to be identified under some context, then we remove the need for RFID per se. So we need a coexistence framework where we work with other technologies. Identity for some people might be relevant. I agree with Professor Muller that we shouldn't have it for everybody, but as yesterday we discussed, there's millions of people out there that need this for their safety. So how do we do that?
I'm going to make a confession that so when my kid went to Washington, D.C. on a school trip, I asked her to keep her, add me as a friend on her phone so I could track her, which she immediately declined. And I was all worried, we were worried, so I slipped a tile into her bag. And I asked her afterwards, how was the Smithsonian? She says, how did you know I went? I said, I just knew. So I completely agree. That was a complete violation of privacy, but she was 12 at the time, so I could get away with it. But I do think that this is, the human aspect is very important. And it's actually beyond humans. It's also sort of our ecosystem.
Yes.
Right? So I completely agree with you on that. So I'm going to maybe close. We have about 10 minutes with another question, which is also open to the audience. Yeah, go ahead, sir. You had a comment?
Yeah, my name is Jun Zhang. I am a hardcore WE person from my undergraduate study, but recently my project I received are not that hardcore. For example, I received projects from RFID data analytics, and they want me to do life cycle production management. I received project from also RFID data on production cost estimate just from RFID data. So all these kinds will involve machine learning, artificial intelligence, big data analytics. My question is, are these topics still count into the scope of RFID, or should if I submit a paper here in this conference, is going to be still accepted, or should I go somewhere else?
So,
Yes, send your paper. It's a good paper, we want it. No, but you're speaking to the heart of why we have a council for RFID to begin with, because these classical silos and IEEE just don't cut it. The antennas of propagation people don't understand that paper. The pure software people might not understand that paper, its contribution. So, but keep coming here. Okay.
So I'm going to close with a question, and I'm catching you cold as with most of my questions. What are the top 3 features, or top 3 directions you would add to Gen 3? If we had to create the next generation of RFID, I'll give you some time to think about it. So Gen 2 was launched. We had launched Gen 1 at the Auto ID Center, and we were worried about volumes, dense reader mode, etc. So I wrote a document, a spec for what the Gen 2 protocol would need to do. And one of the things I said was it should be like SQL. You should be able to query a population and say, those but not those but these, And I also said that it should be population sort of elastic. In other words, it shouldn't be a protocol that works for a certain population but not another. And our extraordinary colleagues, Steve Smith, Chris Diorio, a whole bunch of people were involved, invented the queue algorithm, invented sessions, invented the select command, etc., etc. And now with V2, a lot of security, right? So I wrote that document in 2003. Many vendors tried to, I wouldn't say kill me, but were very upset with me for doing that because they just released their Gen 1. But if we had to do a Gen 3, what features would you add? Anyway, go ahead.
Number 1 feature would be efficient streaming of data. As you think more about high-rate sensors that you might integrate with a tag, efficiently getting the data out in larger packet sizes, more efficient use of the channel.
We completely agree. In fact, we implemented an RF controller for cars, for remote control cars. It was a real mess because we had to sort of kludge it. Yeah, go ahead. You had a question. You had a comment?
Exactly the opposite. We should add low bitrate stuff as well. Go below 40 kilohertz. Go to
low bitrate. Low bitrate.
Low bitrate.
Exactly. I don't think these are opposite. They're
opposite. I said high bitrate. I said low bitrate.
No, I think he meant streaming, and you're talking about bitrate. He wants streaming to be.
I'm speaking about efficiency in terms of the number of bits that are transferred to enable streaming.
Right.
Okay, so I'm explicitly saying
low
we should
bitrate.
have low bitrate stuff,
Got it.
ultra low bitrate stuff. Okay,
right.
And we should also educate people about short packet communication, short packet channel encoded communication, and associated receivers. Because from my experience, what I have seen so far, even in the RFID Gen 2 community, people are doing suboptimal detection techniques.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, but I do think those two are all cooperative, though. You can have low
Complementary.
complementary, yeah, complementary.
But that was the genius of Gen 2 to begin with, right? Like that was the first standard where you had selectable data rates. And what it meant
That's
is that inventory tag could also be used in open highway tolling if you tweak the parameters. Right? So what I hear that is like, we just need to take that to the next level.
So you would expand the breadth of applications by maybe having a couple more knobs, bitrate, streaming, et cetera,
Faster data rate streaming, and then also a lower bitrate option as well.
Well, is there anything, now those are knobs.
Yes.
Is there anything fundamental? Anyone? Paul, what would you add?
I think going back to your inspirational talk at the beginning, we really need to look at the big picture and what RFID can bring. We're talking about the competition with Bluetooth and maybe other technologies. Fundamentally, RFID brings the capability to operate passive or to operate in areas where there's no power, as you said at the beginning. And if that is really the vision that we want to drive, then in my opinion, we need to take some inspiration in what, for example, 5G is doing and disconnect physical layer from the application level. So I think Matthew's team is doing some really exciting stuff on millimeter wave. We're talking about harvesting. We're talking about so many things we can do at the physical level. There was the point on decoupling the backscatter from the harvesting. At the end of the day, what characterizes RFID, I guess, is the backscatter technology more than the harvesting technology. And other than that, whether we're talking 915 megahertz or whether we're talking 2.5G or millimeter wave, I think we definitely need to have a spec for what the physical area is at this frequency, that frequency, and so on. But that's the detail. If we decouple the physical layer from the application level, then we can really specify the framework where RFID will make a difference in the next 10 to 20 years.
That's terrific. Well, look, it's 11:57, and so I'd like to go to the audience and get any more questions. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Hi. So just following your guys' discussion on this, I was really inspired by Professor Reynolds' recent work on some biological application. And it's not really a question. It's so a lot of times I ask myself, like, when we're designing or like making a new application, would that be easier to just use some other kind of technology, maybe in a lower cost or like lower complexity? And we talk about Gen 3 standard protocols, and I think the protocol or standard is a body or incarnation of our expectation for this technology in the future. So I'm curious about your comments on this.
My view is if another technology does something better, you're serving the community by using it. I don't think we should force fit RFID. That's what I said earlier, you know. Computer vision can do a lot of these things in 2018 much better than RFID can. Much faster, much cheaper, because of cell phone cameras. They become so powerful. The image processing is spectacular. The GPUs, you know, the machine learning you put in, it's spectacular. The cloud, right? Don't do something with RFID if something else is better. That's sort of my view. You know, I don't know what the others think. Right? And I really see all technologies as part of the same family of this design language. Our goal should be to solve the damn problem, you know?
Yes, I would say that if you look at the smartphone, I think we've talked about this before, there's approximately 5 radios in there and maybe 7 different frequency bands. So that is a very heterogeneous device from a technology perspective. But from the perspective of a human user, you know, Sanjay's daughter, I guess, it's a smartphone, it's one thing. The engineer's view is this is an incredibly complicated 7-band multi-radio system. So, you know, the value comes from the human user saying, this is a smartphone, I've got one, everybody else has got one, and it can do this Swiss Army knife of different things.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so I think these are the very powerful technologies. Maybe closing comments from Greg and Paul on the whole discussion, but also on the question.
Yeah, I think we already said this before, and I can only follow. Matthew's comments. There is a room for everyone, and anyway, people won't adopt the second best technology. You can try to drive it, but there's only so much. Unfortunately for us as a company, there's only so much you can do with marketing. People will anyway adopt better technology when it is available and when it's at the right price point.
So no, this is great. So let me close with a little story about why RFID is necessary. You know, I read somewhere that about a machine learning algorithm for detecting wolves and dogs. So, you know, wolves and dogs look very similar. Well, some dogs. It's hard to tell them apart. So it's a bit of a challenge. And I read about this algorithm that was trained to classify wolves from dogs. And it was quite an achievement. And there was one problem. The problem was, it wasn't actually separating wolves from dogs. It's just that all the wolf pictures had snow in the background. It was detecting snow. Right? So there's something to be said for ID and a digital, provable identification. And for all my excitement about computer vision, I think to be able to positively and definitely establish an ID will remain. Actually comes back to your question, right? Is the person wandering, or is it someone else who looks like that person? ID is what makes us what we are, and I think that we need to never lose sight of that. Thank you very much. It's really been a pleasure, and see you over the rest of the conference.